Okay, hey folks, this is Intro to AI Coding Agents. From autocomplete to autonomy. And it wouldn't be much of an AI presentation if it weren't generated mostly by AI, okay? So I'm going to do this in kind of two voices. One is going to be the sort of like conventional wisdom, thank you OpenAI Deep Research for helping me like give a nice historical overview of the emergence of coding agents and what's been going on over the last 2 years. It's going to be kind of like the boring, neutral history, and I'm going to interleave that with like my highly opinionated commentary. I run a company called OpenAgents. I'm competing with pretty much every company that you're going to see here. So I'm going to like be shit talking. So I'm going to try to be like neutral, but also entertaining and truthfully accurate about how awesome my shit is. Anyways, let's jump into it. So I'm going to go kind of quickly through this, but also kind of bounce back to Twitter for a few of these things. So just the absolute basics of like, what is an AI coding agent? A software tool powered by AI that can assist in writing, fixing, and understanding code based on natural language. Think of them as AI pair programmers or even autonomous coders that help you build software. They use LLMs trained on code. They can generate code, blah, 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 debug, examples of tasks. Thank you. Basic. Okay. So back in the day, a very long time ago, 2010s, ancient times, IDEs had basic code autocomplete, and then the big shift was when autocomplete was sort of augmented by GitHub Copilot, kind of smarter completion, you know, the beginning of like tab to complete things. GPT 3.4 came out in 2022. ChatGPT coming out, that was the big, obviously the landmark watershed for a lot of this stuff starting to really take off. 2023, this says rise of quote unquote agents. The earliest thing that people called agents, projects like AutoGPT, where people figured out that you could take the basic, DaVinci or GPT-3 models from an OpenAI, throw them in a loop. Early discovery of like, hey, make a plan, loop through the plan. Okay, I ended up with some code that is largely a science experiment type things. Like nothing has been really usable in the production, but a lot of kind of like science project type experiments coming out of that time. The concept of an AI that could plan and execute coding tasks gained popularity. 2023, end of 2023 was when I got turned on to agents largely because they were hinting at it in the Sam Altman's Dev Day presentation, I think in December of 2023. And they kind of introduced their early version of something that would become agents called GPTs. And they were going to do a GPT store, but with the idea that this would evolve into agents over time. I was like, oh crap, if OpenAI thinks agents are the future, I want to do a more open version of the things that they're doing. More on that later. Now this is late 2023, really more into 2024, the first autonomous coders. Startups began pushing AI developer bots. The big one that got everyone talking was a company called Cognition Labs unveiling an app called Devin. They branded that as the first AI software engineer that could build entire solutions autonomously. They came out with a really big glossy kind of hype video. A bunch of influencers will like make response videos calling them liars because they creatively edited some of the parts and implied that they did more on Upwork than they didn't. And of course, you can't check the work because none of this stuff is open source. But anyways, Devin has evolved and, they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars at a $2 billion valuation. They're probably the leading, quote unquote, true agent. We'll get more into the kind of comparison matrix later. But so the advancements that kind of drive this. The period of 2023 to 25, massive leaps in AI capabilities for coding. GPT-4 was a big kind of step change. Claude models, particularly the 3.5 Sonnet models, it's just been this like massive level up compared to everything before. It's taken really, I think, until now, just the last few weeks before the sort of sentiment has kind of turned against some of the Claude, particularly the 3.5 Sonnet models, which have been just completely dominant for the last year. There's a lot of complaints about the new kind of replacement for that 3.7 Sonnet kind of going off the rails. We saw like a little bit of that earlier today with Paul's talk. Thank you very much. Props to Paul for getting an actual like working software from Sonnet 3.7. I spend so much time just like you came up with something that we think worked. We didn't look into see how much of that was actually pseudocode. Anyways, Claude has been sort of king of like coding models until recently. A bunch of developers, including myself, have had a lot of really good experience with the Gemini models. The Gemini 2.5 Pro has been amazing. My workflow these days is to, in the web interface of Gemini, kind of dump in almost my entire code base or all of the like relevant files that I'm working with. I write a script to like copy all of the relevant files that I'm working with, throw it into Gemini, say write a plan for giving instructions to a coding agent to actually implement this. I take that, I put it into either a markdown file or just paste it directly into the Claude Code, which is its own kind of like desktop-based coding agent. That's actually got the ability to run the tools to kind of like navigate around your code base. But when it gets stuck, which it sometimes does, I can copy paste that whole thing, drop it back into Gemini. Again, super inefficient and opportunity to improve that workflow, but the workflows are changing week by week, month by month, it seems. A month ago, I was just using Claude Code. A month before that, I was using something else or relying more on Cursor, this kinds of things. So extended thinking and planning, a bunch of models kind of as a result of OpenAI popularizing the O series models, which have additional reasoning capabilities. It's like a separate process than the main generation. You can basically use this idea called test time compute to do a lot more inference or a lot of computing as sort of inference time to run as like a long reasoning chain. And then that reasoning chain helps to inform the final result. So it helps it kind of think step by step before it answers. This enables more complex outputs like multi-step code edits or non-trivial algorithm design. Okay, tool use and integration. So yeah, this is the other big major breakthrough was letting these agents use external tools. By 2024, AI coding agents could call compilers, run test suites, search documentation, or use shell commands as part of their process. So until the most recent kind of like wave of models that came out in the last few months, I had been largely using OpenAgents, this web product that I've been working on and doing different iterations of, where I have just like sort of generic model selection. So I'd use Sonnet primarily. And then I would have in here a selection of tools. Each one of these is what it just described as tools. And they map almost entirely to GitHub APIs. So I can do something like, I don't even know if this is connected to anything. Look at OpenAgents Inc., OpenAgents, and summarize the README.
Are these MCP, or are they just...
So this is not MCP. This is just my set of tools that I wrote against the GitHub API like months ago, and then like on the to-do list is to kind of replace these with the more official ones from MCP servers. And then ideally to not even need to be writing any tools ourselves, but just pulling in any arbitrary MCP things. But so there was a time for some number of months where I did the majority of my coding through this OpenAgents interface, just having it make direct commits to my GitHub API with some limitations like the edit file tool in here only rewrites the entire file content. So if it's a long file, number one, it can be wasteful to do that many kind of tokens rewriting the whole file. It's not as effective as some of the more desktop apps that have the kind of like being able to do really laser focused search and replace. But just this idea of you're using a model in conjunction with a series of tools to do things relevant for you. For a developer, you're using GitHub primarily. I also use an integration with the Firecrawl service for web scraping, in addition to grep. This was my first experiment at being able to tap into some of the tools that usually run locally. If you're in like a Linux-based CLI environment, the models are going to be doing a lot of things like grep and glob to kind of search over your code base. That's going to be better than what the like GitHub-based search would be. In this case, I set up a third-party sort of a microservice on a DigitalOcean droplet where I cloned down the repo to run this grep, and like it all works decently, but still not as good as the like latest stuff. So I've been personally in kind of this race to try to have, for my own self at least, a set of tools that is not making so many of the opinionated choices of some of the things like Claude. Like where Claude, for example, this is an amazing workflow. I'm using Claude Code heavily, but like it only works with Claude Code or with the Claude models. I want to be using Gemini. Gemini is amazing. So a lot of the agent tools that are out there being put out by these big labs that only work with their own tools. Props to OpenAI, their Codex launch recently, they started off kind of focusing on their own models. First of all, it's open source, which is kind of a surprise from OpenAI, which I have called closed AI. Compare that to Anthropic, which actually issued a DMCA takedown notice to a dev who like took the code and like forked it. I mean, it's code that they distribute as binaries or as actually like compiled JavaScript. So someone just kind of like took the code that they distributed, reverse engineer, like deminified it, and then put it on GitHub, and they're like sending takedown notices. Whereas OpenAI, they just recently added support for other models. Now, I could not get this to work at all. I mean, I got it to work where it theoretically works with Gemini, but it's still been super unreliable. So one of the themes I want to touch on here is that like some tweet I saw, some developer was like, with all of these new tools and new models coming out day after day, week after week, like I don't actually want to be spending X% of my time every week like testing the latest models. Like, can I have one interface that actually just fucking works and is upgradable and hopefully like model agnostic? So hopefully I've got some thoughts on what that should look like. We'll touch on later. Let's get back to that. So tool use is the big unlock. I'll just mention here this thing that now the entirety of Twitter is super excited about, called Model Context Protocol. This is an open protocol released by Anthropic that now a whole bunch of people, including even OpenAI and a bunch of larger companies, are adopting. For a while, this has been a way for developers to run a set of tools that they can kind of like pull down to their local computer and give their agent access to that. So you can pull down the GitHub MCP server. So instead of needing to like write your own tools like I did or use some tool someone else wrote, you can have like this one kind of authoritative source where GitHub is going to release their official MCP server. Now you can just like pull that into any client that supports MCP. Now you've got access to all of their tools from the official service provider. Until recently, that was just kind of like living on every developer's computer individually. They just shipped version 2 of the Model Context Protocol with auth and a few things enabling remote MCP servers. So now you no longer even need to run everything on your computer, and you no longer even need to necessarily have a computer client be the only way of consuming these things. There are now web-based MCP clients, like web pages, websites that are chat apps, where you can just drop in a link of MCP servers that are out there to pull in all those tools. There's still a lot of gotchas around that in terms of if you try to add like 2 or 3 MCPs and each one has 20 tools, like 50 tools in the model's context window overwhelms it. So there's still a lot of like, this all doesn't necessarily work smoothly necessarily. And I haven't heard of any developer who's like just completely skating on easy street because they've got something completely figured out that's like perfect. Like there's a lot of this stuff is like really rough edges, takes a lot of like, configuration to even get to and then continually changing it. Anyways, multi-file and memory. AI editors are starting to maintain state and memory of large projects. Innovations like Codium's Cascade that kind of powers what's now called Windsurf index entire projects to let the AI understand cross-file relationships. There's another one I mentioned earlier called Open Code that just was open source a few days ago. That takes advantage of the language server protocol. Just a lot of the kinds of things that your editors have used for years for type hinting, or being able to like jump you from one file to the next. No LLM based agent has ever like integrated that until this one. So there's still a lot of like very basic things that are being added to make the agents better. This is sort of like OpenAI's deep research list of who's who for notable coding agents. They left off a few probably important ones like Replit and a few like that. But so you've got Cursor. I use Cursor from a company called AnySphere. We're in talks to be acquired by OpenAI, who's now acquiring Windsurf. Just like they've raised a lot of money. So standalone AI-powered code editor. I can show you here what my cursor looks like. Just the chat on the left, and my kind of, it was nice. I had a pretty like customized VS Code setup, so to be able to like pull that config into here is nice. I don't use Composer this very much anymore. For like little tiny edits, I'll use it, but Cursor tends to be so hardcore on pruning conversation history, in part to minimize the tokens that they're sending, which makes sense because what am I paying them? I'm paying them $20 a month, if that. I think I'm even on the free plan now, but I'm using 3.5 Sonnet. So obviously I'm not like, I've probably cost Cursor thousands of dollars. Thank you, Cursor. But like they're subsidizing my usage. But part of how they're trying to like not completely bleed to death is they're very aggressive about like, oh, you have a long conversation, but they're only going to send like probably the last 4 messages with like a condensed version of the previous ones. So if you're like, oh, I told you this, it maybe does a cosine similarity thing to pull in the code that you're talking about, but it can kind of like lose context. I didn't do any of that when I did OpenAgents, that interface over there. I sent like the entire conversation history every time. And I know I can really feel how like dumb this is, because I can compare it to sending the entire conversation history as I did with OpenAgents, where I can get way smarter edits, generally, and way more like understanding, but it costs more. So there's all these trade-offs between how much your tokens you're spending and the quality of it. Apparently Cursor has a bunch of knobs to like kind of shift things around. I want this to be more or be less. I've been like a developer. I've been coding since the 90s, and I work in this stuff full time for the last 2 years, and I still cannot deal with the level of like cognitive overhead of like, what should all of the little dials and doohickeys do for like the version that they're shipping every day, and then what does Windsurf do, and what the other thing do? It's like there's so much shit out there, and I want to make this point here, which is I actually don't think that the future of coding is going to be so IDE centric. So I'm just going to read this a little bit, interview quote that I gave. I don't think that these agentic IDEs, you can call them, is how engineers are going to be coding in 5 years. I think it's the wrong direction. And as I'm allocating for my decisions, like I don't want to be building for what today or tomorrow is. A lot of people are just trying to like eke out these little incremental gains, kind of taking the ID and iterating that a little bit. But what are engineers actually going to be doing 5 years from now? What do you think? I think people are not going to be sitting in their editors generally. I think code generation is going to replace the editor largely, or that won't be the appropriate interface. What tells me that something is going in the wrong direction is when complexity is added onto interfaces that are clearly designed for humans like VS Code. If you're forking VS Code, like Cursor and Windsurf have done, which is already this complex piece of software from Microsoft with all the trade-offs they've chosen to make, and then you're layering all this other stuff on there to kind of empower the human, but then also add all this other agentic stuff. There's so much cognitive overhead that goes into that. I just think it's going in the wrong direction. Look at another Microsoft product, the GitHub Copilot Workspaces thing, which apparently no one even gives a shit about nowadays. This was a couple months ago. I'm a developer. I've been using GitHub for 20 plus years, but the interface is so complex, all these bells and whistles and branches. Like now I have to learn their particular UI, which like now no one is using. It's nowhere near state of the art. It's just kind of like a big waste of time. We think it should be as simple as you say a thing and it happens, with some amount of oversight to drill down to see what's happening, with whatever level of detail that you're comfortable with to steer it better. Fundamentally, the interfaces should be simplifying over time. If you're adding complexity, you're going in the wrong direction. A lot of this stuff can and should be abstracted. So even though while I use Cursor day to day and I like learn kind of the bare minimum necessary to be, maximally productive with this, I'm actively building to try to replace this. A thing that I think this will look like in the near term, 6+ months out, is more of a dashboard for controlling multiple different coding agents. It's a little bit more like what Devin does. And let me start with this before I go more on my approach here.
What does IDE mean? I'm sorry.
Integrated development environment. So every thing like this where you're pulling up and it's got your code, your this over here, your AI panes, terminals, anything that you need to, like, as a developer, you're sitting in there and you're making decisions and you've got all of your data that you need and you're the one coding and driving. But the human is not going to be the one coding and driving, so this doesn't even make any fucking sense.
So basically what Paul and Ben have been showing us the past 2 weeks, like all those different...
Yes. All vibe coding right now is done through an IDE like this. Yeah. There are web-based IDEs like Replit, and then there are other things like Cognition, and they just, I guess, opened their product up. They have like a $500 a month version, and they just added a cheaper version. So you can go and like sign up for Devin right now if you want to, but it's a little bit more asynchronous. You tell the agent something that you want to do, you give it the access it needs to, your GitHub or whatever. It like goes off and does it, and then it like gives you a report, and you kind of like talk to it, and it does stuff for you. Still not super reliable, but you have a bunch of people saying that in the companies that they're targeting as their potential users, like, hey, this works well for reviewing pull requests, kind of basic things. But the idea is that this is going to evolve into something that can be a drop-in replacement for a human. But I definitely think that idea of you're saying something, you're basically going AFK, you can have 10 different agents working on 10 different things, you're getting whatever level of reporting that you want on that, you're getting whatever level of visibility that you want in that, but you're not sitting in an editor wrestling with like linting errors and stuff that like agents really should be figuring out for you. Let me just give a little quick teaser at what I'm building for this. So we're going to be rolling this out, some early version of this in the next week or so. So aside from like, we're going to pull over all the chat from our current product that's live, but generally we want you to have an agents dashboard that can have one or more agents doing one or more different things, and it's asynchronous. So you're going to give it the access to things that you need. So GitHub, in this kind of, it's somewhat demo, but somewhat live, I've given it access to my Anthropic API key so it can call Claude, and my GitHub access token so it can act as me on GitHub. And let me just actually just create this. So the demo agent is hard-coded. I've pointed it at, oh, it even linked it. There you go. If you can tell, the AI, UI was written largely by AI. Okay, so I actually have an issue where I'm trying to build an MVP of a coding agent that can run overnight. And this is like, I've been working on this for the last 2-3 weeks. I mean, I've largely been building up to this for the last 2 years. But the next video of our 100+ series that I'm going to be putting out in the next few days. So I did a video a couple weeks ago called Overnight Agent, where I used the Cloudflare Agents SDK, a great SDK for building agents. I just had it like loop R1 overnight and like come back to some like crazy, just insane stuff. You can read the like logs and stuff there. But the question then was like, okay, we can reason overnight and come up with some interesting stuff, but like, can we code overnight? So this is what I'm working on, and this is the interface for that. And what I hope out of this, at the end of this, I have all of y'all's contact information or whatever, because I would love to get some beta testers on this over the next week or so. So here's the idea. You give it a primary kind of goal. The goal that I've given it here is to just create an execution plan to address the GitHub issue, but it's really going to be like implement the entire thing. Not really on this issue, because this is what I'm already kind of building, but you give it any example issue and it's just going to like go and do it for you. You've got the status update top right. If I click play, it's going to go in progress. That says agent resumed. It will be just kind of fully updating the UI, but for now I have to refresh the page. So what it's doing now is it should be reading the issue and then passing it to Claude and saying, come up with an execution plan. And it did. So it's right now on step 3, and it doesn't have the full like suite of tools connected to it yet, but you can at least kind of see what it's doing. Okay, the current step is this. So I can go into the plan. I can say, okay, step 1, create an execution plan to address the issue. What did it do? Oh, set up the development environment with Cloudflare Agents SDK. It didn't do this because it doesn't have the ability to do that. But if I go back to see, I think I have up here this one. Yeah, so here it's like, it stepped through, I mean, it skipped over the stuff that didn't actually have the ability to do, and then it like ran into an error here. So these are the completed steps. Here's the error step. Here's the pending step. And then I can go in and review, okay, like here's this. I'll go copy this into, an AI interface. Until, a week after this, I'm not going to need to copy this anywhere, because they'll have some check that's like, okay, we ran into an error. Let's do our own diagnosis, but all kind of rolled into this same system. So the idea here is you have an agent that is asynchronous, that it can kind of float and run, doing what you ask it to do with the kinds of things that you would want to see. Okay, where did it get stuck on? And right now, this UI is not ideal at all. I want to be able to see in each plan step. I click here, like pop open what the actual logs were, but you can see that it's, we've got an actual response from here, from Claudia. I'll help you develop an agent orchestration layer with a modular architecture for an autonomous coding agent MVP using durable objects, blah, 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 blah. And then what are the metrics? How many steps completed, LLM cost, tools called, cost. I want to see how much this actually is costing me. And then we can set some interesting things around like, hey, you are costing me $1 an hour, $5 an hour, whatever that is. Can you engage in economically relevant activity? Here's a Bitcoin wallet, agent. Go make some fucking Bitcoin, okay? So I want to have people have agents that can go be economically relevant actors and go earn them some fucking Bitcoin, and I will take a cut of that. So, but you'll be happy for it. Okay, so config, blah, blah, blah. And this is all just kind of like me taking a giant spec, working it out with Gemini, having that translate into, unit and feature tests. I've rewritten this same code base in so many different languages. I did a version in Rust. I did a version in different kinds of TypeScript. I've come back to my bread and butter, which is Laravel, PHP. Yes, AGI will be written in PHP. That's my. So anyway, I've got like 211 passing tests here of like functionality that's actually working, and then a bunch of it isn't. So anyways, this is what I'm working on this week. Okay. To sum up, I don't think that the future of coding agents is going to be like you wrestling and yelling at your code editor. You shouldn't even need to be here at all. Why am I even looking at? I'm not reading any of these fucking files. Obviously, it's good that I can, but that's only because the agent sucks, and I shouldn't need to be caring about this. You always want the ability to be able to drop down, but not have to need to.
So you're saying it's more going to be like server architecture, like how back in the day I would just go and see if everything's up and running, and just looking at processes. And just adhering to any kind of...
You should be able to take it for granted, and then you're just sending your email or whatever you want to do.
That's interesting.
It's just an interesting little blurb. It did not include us in its first cut of like things that matter until I was like, add OpenAgents to it. But it's interesting that like the OpenAI deep research, like it just basically crawled our GitHub repo, which has some like older type things. But I'll just read this anyway because it's a nice to hear it from the AI. Building on evolution. OpenAgents.com positions itself as a platform that brings together the best of these coding agents in an open, extensible environment. We've seen how powerful AI coding agents can be. OpenAgents aims to make these capabilities accessible to everyone. Agentic Chat UI. Rather than a single-purpose tool, OpenAgents provides a unified chat interface where you can summon different agents. For coding, there's a coder agent that behaves similarly to Claude Code, but you can also switch context to other agents. I got a little bit of that now where on like openagents.com, you can at the bottom switch. This just like swaps out the tool set. Assistant is just like basic tools. Coder has like a system prompt that's more adapted to tooler. But I want to have a researcher agent too. And then part of the idea here is rather than expect that these big labs are going to like, oh, let me use OpenAI's deep research. And then everyone like tries to compete with that, but everyone's like kind of building their own, hey, use my agent, use my this thing. I think the way that we beat the big labs is by uniting everyone else. So rather than even the cognition people, okay, you've taken the 10 smartest math nerds, you've given them $200 million, you put them in a room, they produce Devin. What beats that? So in my mind, it is a properly incentivized open source community where if you know that you have the best knowledge at one particular thing, let's say that you have the best retrieval algorithm that works on this particular like niche topic, niche data set, Rust library, something for that. You should be able to create the module for that and expose that into some MCP registry along with your Bitcoin address. So whenever your module is included in some workflow with revenue flowing through it, you should get a tiny piece of that, okay? Actual market forces, that's the one thing that the MCP people that are all excited about it, what are they not including? There's no payments, there's no discoverability. We want to add payments and discoverability. When we did a year ago, our sort of like MVP agent store launch, because we had this idea, I started OpenAgents the day after the Dev Day presentation from OpenAI, because when they announced that they were going to be doing a GPT store with revenue sharing, I was like, they're going to half-ass the monetization. They're going to half-ass the revenue sharing. It'll be gated. You can't like that's where there should be like a permissionless version of that. And they did half-ass. They never rolled out monetization. It was never a store. It was a complete dud. We did our own version where like we let developers build these plugins using these WASM modules, the framework that lets you write a plugin in any of 10 different languages, consume it from 10 different languages. You could kind of compose plugins into agents via our UI. And then whenever anybody used that, you would get a tiny piece of Bitcoin. Two problems with that. This was before tools were even a thing. There was no MCP back then. We were kind of building a lot of this stuff manually. And we did not have any truly compelling use case for which people were willing to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars. I came to believe 6+ months ago that like, oh, that use case for which people are going to be wanting to pay is coding agents, a reliable coding agent. So the idea now is, can we take this idea of crowdsourced extensibility and pair it with these agents? Because if you've got the best at that one thing, it should not be sitting by itself. It should be able to be pulled into an agent that people are paying. They're slapping down their credit card or paying Bitcoin to one interface, OpenAgents, or fork it if you want to run your own, and just have the payment come in for a good agent and let that get split out. So that's what we're trying to roll out over the next month or two, is to just kind of solve this problem of like, there are still no truly reliably good agents. Stuff is like an accelerant. It speeds you forward, but then you careen into a brick wall. You got to kind of back up and be like, that hurt. And then like careen forward again, careen into the next back wall. But we all know as developers, like, it's still multiplying our productivity by 3x, 5x, whatever it is. It's just like, obviously so much more can be done. I want to be able to spin up 10 coding agents to like do some PRs that I write so I can go like play with my son and just know that when I come back to my computer, shit's actually working and I don't have to like dive into code because shit's like completely horrible. My bet overall is that kind of reliability is going to come best and should come best from open source communities. I'll just touch on the rest of this presentation here. Feature comparison. So Copilot, began as auto completion. They're now trying to like do a UI, but Microsoft is not very good at innovating, I guess. Cursor, they say medium autonomy, excellent in-editor experience. Windsurf, I don't actually know what they're even basing that on. So Claude Code, I use this heavily. I've found that this is the best at like being able to navigate around a code base, call the right types of tools. But again, it's just like this closed source thing tied to one lab. In order to leverage Gemini, I'm copy pasting back and forth. Like anytime you find yourself copy pasting as an opportunity for someone to come in and add more automation to that. Devin is right now the highest autonomy agent that's like reliable at least some things. But again, we think that this should be like open and extensible and not just for whatever enterprise clients that they're targeting. Questions, comments, anything anyone wants to say?
The open source communities that you're pulling in from, is that the filters and toggles at the bottom of the OpenAgents?
Not yet. So the one at openagents.com, these are just tools that I wrote. I did some work a few weeks ago on like getting a MCP integration added there. I mean, there's a bunch of editors doing this now. Let's see. Yeah, so first stab at MCP UI. You can select or deselect specific tools from any local or remote MCP server, but then like I kind of almost don't want to proceed with this because I'm now starting to get into the territory of like, this is one thing I've been wrestling with is am I creating a product for a power user, the type of person who's going to know what the fuck any of this is, MCP, or try to like start abstracting that out and provide a more opinionated use case. So for example, one of my favorite beta testers is my wife, who is a game designer, like knows a little bit of code, but like wants to be able to like create software driven products, and like wants to like have software. And her feedback to me was like, she doesn't want this. Don't make me select between 12 fucking things. Those are my words, not hers. But like, just let me talk to it, and it should just know what to do. It's like, that's amazing feedback that me as like a min-maxing developer, like video gaming nerd, I'm like, oh no, I like the 12. Oh yeah, let me test this one. But then I'm also getting fatigued at just like, oh god, look at all this shit. Like I did an update from Quasar to the GPT-4 one. It's just like exhausting keeping up with all the bullshit. And so like there's a bunch of businesses out there that are just like, all right, let's just expose every single possible dial to the users, the developers, and they'll figure it out. And like I find myself as a consumer of these, I sometimes want that level of control. Like I do want to go down here and like, okay, Sonnet's being retarded. Let me see if 4.1 is less retarded on this thing. But like you've got right now, 10 million developers all doing that exact same thing and all having their own lessons about like 4.1's retarded on this, Sonnet's smart on it. But like take that knowledge and put it into a piece of code that you throw into a registry that someone pays you for that, and have that be composed into an actual agent that's good. That's our theory. That's what we're working with. I hope in the next week or so to have a UI here that you all can sign up on, and like we're gonna start playing with that. Breeze just came out with a web-based Lightning wallet. Their Breeze SDK, they added WASM support so you can embed it into a website. So it's gonna be as simple as you create an account at OpenAgents.com. There's gonna be a built-in Lightning wallet. You're gonna be able to just earn Bitcoin for like doing cool things like creating a piece of code that gets used in some MCP server. If it's used in an agent, you should get paid for it, is what we're trying to do. Other questions, comments, insults? Go ahead.
So Christopher, just real quick, just because I'm really slow. You said that you have to select the two things, but they don't learn from each other. So how did you plan on doing that? You said that you were just going to, you said it really fast.
So Gemini has an API.
Right.
But right now,
Because you're having to switch between the toggles, and then it just, like, you said something registry, and then you just, like...
okay, so in terms of my main workflow, where it's like I've got Claude Code. What are you asking specifically?
You said that when you're in like Cursor or something, y'all switch between the different Claude
Models. Yep.
models, and then it'll this one will be better than the other one. But instead of learning from each other or learning from the different ones, it doesn't. And so.
Well, and I wasn't even talking so much about like the models learning from each other. I'm more like every developer is like encountering the pain points of knowing like what kind of works for their own workflow, right? And like there's a level of like that's always going to be like a comment to something. But if I'm on the bleeding edge and I'm doing all of this testing and like, how can my knowledge be like I'm acquiring an economically valuable asset called I'm learning about stuff. And you know how some people monetize that as they like build a following on X or like make a fucking video course and like buy my shit. But people on the bleeding edge don't have time for that stuff. It should be as simple as like I've identified a market need for a thing. I'm writing the best WASM plugin that does Bitcoin payments for this, or I've figured out some way of prompting, for example. So don't forget, MCP is not just tools. It's tools, it's prompts, it's resources. This is like the way that agents can discover things that are relevant to doing what should be economically valuable work. So if you've got even just a prompt that's good for a certain thing, or if you can see that there's an agent, okay, OpenAgents.com, these three people have worked together on like this agent and it's good for this, but I can click in and I can see the prompt and I'm like, wait a second, you're saying this, but you're not saying this part. Click fork, add your prompt. If that's better, you should get a cut of that. Let people make money from upgrading agents collectively. There's no collaboration like that at all.
Okay,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Do you think we can get something like that with A2A?
Yeah. I haven't looked too closely into that. I'm generally skeptical of massive companies dropping, here's our spec, or here's our open protocol. Like, you didn't consult me in this shit. I at least liked how Anthropic rolled that out more kind of, I don't know, developer, grassroots driven. And I imagine there will be either some combination of MCP and A2A, and we may end up just like coming up with our own Nostr-based version of, I don't know.
Yeah, because I agree. Like when I watch Claude Code do its thing, I will see in a lot of instances Claude Code will basically spin up another agent where it's saying like this is a task. Your task, it's saying to itself without the context history, your task is to go find relevant files that do these things. And then it calls the tool use, and then it gives back to the master LLM that. And I feel like when it does that, my results are way better than if it's the master Claude is trying to search and grab it.
Yeah, and that idea of one kind of expensive agent that kind of has all of your project context, being able to spin up a cheaper, more focused agent that's able to do things like just multiply that concept time. Like there should be those kinds of agents running all over the place. Like, okay, my personal agent shall have the context of my life or what project I'm trying to do. Like there should be micro agents out there monitoring different things. And like, I just continually am pissed off that like we're 2 years into agents and like how many agents are working on my behalf right now? Right now, 0. Anyone have any agents running right now? We should all have like 100 fucking agents running. Questions?
Super unrelated, but you mentioned that. What's the LSP MCP thing?
Open code. So there's a big like React influencer guy or entrepreneur, Dax. Didixer, Dax. Anyway, so he had this idea. He's just like a very prominent React person, and he had this idea. He like commissioned it, and then some developer built it. It's called Open Code, and he says it's already the best LLM coding tool I've ever used. Proper terminal UI, fast LSP support, use any model. Because someone had said like. There's been like a theme on like AI engineer adjacent Twitter about like why are none of these tools making proper use of the LSP? So apparently it's can improve, but again,
So it's like kind of a Claude Code alternative with better LSP support.
Yeah, and like this is cool, but every time I see one of these, particularly if it's like a TUI, I mean I really don't like this interface. It's like not even a terminal; it's like a fake terminal. Like take this fucking code. Put it into a web UI that I can reach on my phone. Like I want to be like, do that. Anyway, my prediction is that not just the IDs, but also all these like CLI type things. There will always be like reason for people to go in and like do stuff manually. Just like there's a ton of people that love the hardcore Linux shit, but like for most people, like I want to be able to talk to my phone and have software built, drawing on the best agents, and not need to worry about what model is up at any particular time. I don't think I have anything else to say. Any final comments, questions?
I love the new. If you pull up the new agent dashboard that you're working on now, I love this. I know you talked to me a few weeks ago about.
Two right there. So Tony can talk. Two, or we did earlier. You hit you, and then can you talk in there, Tony? Yeah, thank you.
I love the new agents dashboard. Are you a few weeks ago you were telling me about a desktop one? I haven't been able to play with that yet, but like, is this pretty much where you think it's headed and focusing on this? Because I mean, I honestly the thought of another IDE download,
I know. I've paused. I may revisit doing a desktop app at some point, but like right now, it's like what is the appropriate interface to kind of channel coordination of a lot of people, because I think fundamentally that's the thing that other like builder people are not going to do is like how do you get incentivized, aka paid cooperation, and then like bottle that up, and for that, because the audience for it isn't just developers, people that are comfortable installing these tools. It could be anyone who's got an idea for a prompt. Like I just really think the web UI is what makes sense to start with for that. So I am going to be leaning hardest into this web interface.
And I love this part because it means I can have multiple multiple tasks going on at the same time. I can interject on any different one based on what I'm testing or what I'm doing. So like I think this works a lot more intuitively to what I want with this is a background task. It's going. I can be on my phone. I can resume it on my desktop when I get there, etc.
What's your architecture for this? I think I saw something about Cloudflare agents. Is that?
I did the sort of one that I did, the like kind of test one I did a few days ago was on Cloudflare, and I love the Cloudflare SDK. It's still very new, and so for this interface, that's what I did on Cloudflare. I'm doing this with Laravel. Part of why I'm doing it with Laravel, part of it is I'm most familiar with it, but the other thing is that Laravel has first-class support for like broadcasting queues, basically like glorified cron jobs, and like Cloudflare has their own version of this where like they'll be writing to a SQL database where they'll like keep track of the cron, but like Laravel has like been working on their versions of this for like 15 years. It's really solid.
Wait, you're using that with the Cloudflare SDK or in lieu of?
In lieu of, yeah. Okay. And we'll probably like re-add. So the Cloudflare SDK will be better for like when we want there to be like 100,000 different agents in their own processes, living wherever, and anybody can like one-click deploy to the cloud, and they're all talking to each other. Maybe they're all speaking Nostr to each other. That will make sense for just getting to like product market fit, being able to just have everything more testable with broadcasting everything all kind of knowing itself. But this will still enable anybody to run an arbitrary number of agents with long running processes you know, run your 10, 15, 20 agents.
And with the MCP API stuff, like if you're in the web, you're not going to be able to call like local tools. So you're not going to list my files.
So this is where remote MCP comes in. And then on the files part, that is something that I'm interested in. Cloudflare, they're in June launching their containers SDK, which we're talking about maybe getting early access to. So that is one of the missing primitives. I mean, you can always spin up a container, like I mentioned when we did the grep tool previously. We just like had our own DigitalOcean thing, and we're just like making calls because we cloned the repo to that. But Cloudflare is about to roll out support for containers, Docker containers, basically. So that's one thing. Like if you want to be able to run grep style commands, you're either running on your desktop, or if you're working out of a GitHub repo, okay, container, just clone down my repo, do all this shit there, and it's an isolated environment too. You're not going to fuck up your computer. But for now, we're going to see how far we can get just having the tools be like the GitHub API. But I'm also just going to add in the MCP support. So now it's like, okay, I want to add this MCP. And by the way, you can whip up an MCP server that like gives control conditionally to any MCP client. This is an MCP client. So you want to write something that gives access to your local shell, you can. Anyway, I'll wrap up there. Thank you all so much.
Oh, thanks.
Follow us on Twitter.
Yeah.